Okay, Wildcats. Today we're looking at Thursday, September 6th, inverse functions, part 1. And that's going to be on page 8. So if you would, update your table of contents. All right, now your table of contents are updated. Let's take a look at our notes. Now, at this point, I want you to find your parent function foldable that was on page 4. You're probably going to take it out of your journal, and then once we're done with the video, put it back in your journal in the correct order on page 4. Now, one thing I didn't tell you in making this is that the inverse corresponds to the colors, okay? So you can see that quadratic and square root are pink, well, they're inverses of each other. Cubic and cube root are purple, and they're inverses of each other. Exponential and logarithmic are blue, and they're inverses of each other, okay? All right, so that's why the color was important in the foldable. All right, but now we're going to go to here. We're going to use these notes for today. To find an inverse, f inverse of x, graphical, reflective of the y equals x line. To test for an inverse horizontal line test. Now, we're not going to use that until part 2, but for today, part 1, this is what we need. All right? Algebraic. Method 1, switch the x and y values and resolve for y. That's the method we're going to use today to find the inverse, okay? All right, so let's put that back in our journal. And let's move on to the inverse function examples. Oh, just knocked the camera. Give me a minute because I want to put that page back because it's an important page. I don't want to lose it. Almost there. Aha. All right. All right. So I'm assuming you got that page back in your journal. So now let's take a look at our examples. Remember, this is going to be on page 9. All right. So find the inverse of the linear function. Okay. Remember, method 1 was to switch the x and y and resolve for y. So what we need to do, remember, h of x in this case represents y. So to save a step, you could just write a y over the h of x, but I'm just going to write it here. Y equals 2x minus 9. All right, so you're going to switch the x and y. So you have x equals 2y minus 9. Okay? All right, so now we're going to solve for y. So our first step is we're going to add 9 to both sides. So that's x plus 9 equals 2y. And then the last step, we're going to divide 2 by both sides. So y equals x plus 9 divided by 2. All right. Now, I probably should have, and let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and add some lines to keep the work organized. All right. So example 4. So we're going to write f of x as y equals the square root of 5x. Okay. All right, now we're going to switch the x and y. So x equals the square root of 5y. Okay. So now to solve for y, we're going to square both sides. Okay. And the reason being is you can write the square root of a number this way. Technically, this is a 2 and this is a 1. So this can be written as a number raised to the 1/2 power. Okay. While that is important is because if we were to say, write this as x squared equals 5y to the 1/2 power, and we squared it, we know that here we multiply exponents. So 1/2 times 2 is 2 over 2, which is 1. So we have x squared equals 5y. Last step, divide both sides by 5. And I'm gonna rewrite this as 5y equals x squared, just because I like when I solve to have the y on the left. Okay. So last step, y equals x squared divided by 5. All right. So now let's take a look at example 2. Before we do that, let's get some lines to try to keep our work somewhat organized. I apologize. Usually I'm pretty good about putting these lines on before the video, but we've already started the video, so it won't take too much of your time. All right. So find the inverse of the quadratic function. Okay, so first things first, we're going to write y equals absolute, or parentheses, x plus 5 squared. Remember, the first step is to switch the x and y. So x equals y plus 5 squared. Okay, and remember, the reason we're switching x and y is to find the inverse. All right, so now we're going to take the square root of both sides. Okay, and the concept here is, well, when we square a square root, they become 1. When you take the square of a square root, then these become to the power of 1. So this becomes the square root of x equals y plus 5. And last step, subtract 5 from both sides. But before I do that, I'm going to write it as y plus 5 equals the square root of x. Now subtract 5y. You don't have to do this, but it just, I don't know, something looks nicer when the y is on the left. All right. Now let's take a look at example 5. Find the inverse of the exponential function. So again, we're going to write f of x is y. So y equals 3x squared minus 5. And then next step is to switch the x and y. So x equals 3y squared minus 5. I'm going to add 5 to both sides. So x plus 5 equals 3y squared. Divide both sides by 3. So that's x plus 5 divided by 3 equals y squared. Okay, let's bring our work up here. So the last step is going to take the square root of both sides. This becomes the power of 1. So you have y equals the square root of x plus 5 divided by 3. All right, now let's take a look at last examples. All right. Again, let's take a few seconds to draw some lines to keep our work organized. All right, so example 3. Find the inverse of the cubic function. So first things first. Now, here to save yourself a step, if you want to just write y right there, you can. And then the next step, you can switch x and y. So x equals y minus 2 cubed. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is cube root both sides. Okay, so then you have the cube root of x equals, this becomes to the power of 1, so y minus 2. and then add 2 to both sides. And before I do that again, I'm just going to rewrite so the y is on the left. So now add 2 to both sides. Y equals cube root of x plus 2. You could technically probably go from here to here in the step if you wanted to. You don't actually have to write that step. All right. All right. Last step. Find the inverse of the logarithmic function. Okay, so again, we're going to write f of x as y, and then switch x and y. So x equals the square root of y plus 4. Okay, so we're going to subtract 4 from both sides. So you get x minus 4 equals square root of y. And then last step, we're going to square both sides. This becomes power of 1. So you get y equals x minus 4 squared. All right, so at this point, if you understood all the examples, start working on the assignment. If you had some questions, remember you have 3 options in class. You could be in this small group with me, and I'll go over these problems in traditional format. You could be working with a partner in small group, or you could be watching, if you happen to finish this video, this lesson, you could be watching another video for another day. So with that, have a wonderful Wildcat day.